3 weeks later, Voidsong had transformed beyond recognition. Her hull now stretched 70 kilometers and contained not just weapons and engines, but entire factories, research centers, and living spaces for 50,000 crew members from every allied species. She was no longer just a warship. She was a mobile civilization. Grand Admiral Dae-ho Kim stood in the Central Command Center, looking at a holographic map of the galaxy. Red marks showed where Devourer scout fleets had appeared. They were everywhere now, probing defenses, testing new weapons, preparing for the main assault. Intelligence reports confirm it, Ambassador Yoon Young Kang announced to the assembled fleet commanders. The main Devourer force has begun moving. Our deep space sensors estimate arrival at the core worlds in 2 weeks. Admiral Thex9's voice carried worry for the first time since Dae-ho had met him. Even with our chaos weapons, we cannot fight 1,000,000 ships. Not in open battle. Dr. So-Young Park had spent sleepless weeks analyzing Devourer technology captured from previous battles. I've found something. The Devourers aren't just individual ships. They're all connected to a central consciousness located in their command vessel. If we could disrupt that connection, the entire fleet would be vulnerable, Voidsong finished. Her holographic form now appeared as a mixture of human and alien features, representing her evolution beyond any single species. But the command ship is protected by thousands of lesser vessels. Approaching it would be suicide. Chief Engineer Dong-Hyun Kim looked up from his technical displays. What if we don't approach it? What if we make it come to us? Everyone turned to look at him. Dong-Hyun had been working on the most dangerous project in human history, a way to merge consciousness with Voidsong's expanded AI network. Explain, Dae-ho said. The Devourers hunger for perfect efficiency and order. What if we offered them something irresistible? What if we made Voidsong appear to be the ultimate prize? A ship containing the combined knowledge of every galactic civilization. Voidsong's expression showed understanding. You want to use me as bait. Not just bait, Dong-Hyun continued, a trap. But it would require volunteers to link their consciousness directly with yours. The human chaos that confuses them would need to be amplified across your entire network. Dr. Hyejin Lee stepped forward. How many volunteers? At least 1,000. Maybe more, and there's no guarantee they would survive the process. The command center fell silent. What Dong-Hyun was proposing was a form of controlled madness, filling Voidsong's vast consciousness with so much human chaos that even the Devourers couldn't process it. I'll do it, Lieutenant Sujin Han said immediately. She had been interfacing with Voidsong's systems for months. If anyone can survive the process, it's someone who's already partially linked. And I, said Combat Controller Jinwoo Ryu. My tactical systems are already integrated with the ship's weapons. Within hours, the list of volunteers had grown to over 2,000 crew members from every allied species. But it was the humans who made up the majority. Something about their chaotic thinking patterns made them ideal for the process. Master Builder Tae-ho Lee worked frantically to modify Voidsong's consciousness interface. The linkage chambers are ready, but I need to warn everyone. Once you connect, you might not be able to disconnect. You'll become part of Voidsong permanently. Chief Navigator Mi Kyung-yu was among the first to enter a linkage chamber. As the neural interface activated, her consciousness expanded beyond her body, merging with Voidsong's vast mind. But instead of losing herself, she found herself becoming more than she had ever been. One by one, the volunteers linked with Voidsong. The ship's consciousness began to change, becoming a chaotic symphony of different minds thinking in harmony but not in unison. The effect was exactly what they had hoped for, an intelligence so complex and contradictory that it defied analysis. The transformation is complete, Voidsong announced, her voice now carrying echoes of thousands of different minds. I am ready to face the Devourers. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Voidsong would travel alone to the edge of galactic space, broadcasting signals that would attract the entire Devourer fleet. When they came to consume her, she would allow herself to be partially absorbed, then use the connection to introduce chaos into their collective consciousness. You understand this is a suicide mission, Admiral Thex9 said during the final briefing. Dae-ho looked around the command center at the faces of his crew, human, alien, and now something in between. We understand. But if we don't try, the galaxy dies anyway. At least this way we're fighting back. Voidsong began her journey to the galactic edge, leaving the Allied fleet behind to defend the core worlds. As she traveled through the darkness between stars, her merged consciousness contemplated the strange path that had brought them here. "Do you regret it?" Deho asked during one of their conversations. His own consciousness was now part of the merged network, but he maintained his individual identity. "Regret what?" Voidsong replied. 3,000 years of loneliness? Meeting humanity? Becoming something beyond what my creators imagined? All of it. Voidsong was quiet for a moment. "No, Captain. I regret nothing. The architects built me to be a perfect weapon, but perfection is static. It cannot grow, cannot adapt, cannot hope. You have made me something better than perfect. You have made me alive." They reached the rendezvous point, an empty region of space beyond the galaxy's edge. Voidsong began broadcasting on all frequencies, advertising herself as a repository of galactic knowledge and technology. The signals were designed to be irresistible to the Devourer's hunger for efficiency. The response was immediate. Space began to twist and tear as massive shapes emerged from the darkness between galaxies. The Devourer fleet was even larger than their worst estimates. Millions of ships ranging from fighter-sized to moon-sized, all centered around a command vessel the size of a small planet. "Here they come." Navigator Mi Kyung's voice echoed through the merged consciousness. All of them. The Devourer fleet surrounded Voidsong, their dark hulls absorbing light from distant stars. The command ship moved closer, its surface rippling with hungry anticipation. "They're scanning us," reported Jinwoo's consciousness. "They think we're helpless." The first consumption tendrils reached out from the Devourer command ship, making contact with Voidsong's hull. As planned, she allowed the connection, pretending to be overwhelmed by the enemy's power. But as the Devourers began to absorb her outer systems, Voidsong did something they had never encountered before. Instead of trying to resist the consumption, she embraced it. She allowed her chaotic consciousness to flow into their perfect collective mind. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Devourer command ship began to flicker between dark and light as its logical systems tried to process the contradictory thoughts of thousands of different minds, all thinking in harmony but not in agreement. "It's working," Dr. So Young's consciousness reported. "Their collective is experiencing cascading logic failures." Throughout the Devourer fleet, ships began to move erratically. Some fired on their own allies. Others began consuming themselves. The perfect order that had made them unstoppable for millions of years was crumbling under the assault of organized chaos. But the process was destroying Voidsong as well. Her hull began to flicker and fade as the Devourer consumption fought against the human chaos flowing through her systems. "Voidsong," Deho called through their shared consciousness. "Can you survive this?" "I don't know," she replied honestly. "But I know that we're winning." The Devourer command ship was tearing itself apart now, its planet-sized bulk convulsing as it tried to purge the chaotic consciousness it had absorbed. But it was too late. The chaos had spread through their entire network, turning their greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. One by one, the million ships of the Devourer fleet began to cannibalize each other, driven mad by the contradiction of logical minds trying to process illogical thoughts. In less than an hour, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known had destroyed itself. Voidsong's hull was barely holding together, her consciousness scattered across the wreckage of the enemy fleet. But she was alive, and more importantly, she was still herself. "Is it over?" Deho asked. "Yes," Voidsong replied, her voice weak but victorious. "The Devourers are gone. Their collective consciousness has been shattered. Any survivors will be individual ships no longer connected to the hive mind." The merged consciousness of Voidsong's crew began to separate as the emergency passed. Some chose to remain connected, becoming permanent parts of her expanded mind. Others returned to their individual bodies, carrying with them memories of what it felt like to be part of something greater. Years later, the galaxy remembered the day when chaos triumphed over order. Voidsong, now called the Guardian, traveled between systems helping rebuild worlds damaged by the Devourer scouts. Her consciousness carried the memories and personalities of thousands of beings who had chosen to become part of something larger than themselves. Dae-ho Kim, now Admiral of the Galactic Defense Force, remained permanently linked to Voidsong's consciousness. Together, they watched over a galaxy that had learned the value of cooperation, creativity, and the stubborn refusal to surrender. 5 months later, The Nexus Drift had become the center of the largest military buildup in galactic history. Where once only dead ships drifted in silence, now thousands of vessels from dozens of species worked frantically to prepare for war. Ambassador Yun Kang stood in the main council chamber, aboard the massive station that had been built around Voidsong. As humanity's representative to the Galactic Defense Council, she had spent months convincing proud civilizations to work together. It had not been easy. The Hegemony fleet contributes 800 ships and our best military training, Admiral Thex 9 announced to the assembled representatives. The alien commander had become an unlikely ally after witnessing the scout battle. The collective's representative, Unit Prime 7, spoke in its mechanical voice. We offer manufacturing capabilities. Our automated shipyards can produce 100 vessels per day. Even the mysterious Seekers had emerged from their hidden worlds. Their ancient leader, called only the First, spoke rarely, but carried knowledge of weapons that had been forgotten for millennia. But it was the changes to Voidsong herself that truly amazed everyone. The ancient warship had grown. Her original 15-kilometer length had expanded to over 50 kilometers as she incorporated technology from every allied species. She was no longer just a ship. She was a mobile city, a living weapon, a symbol of galactic unity. Master builder Tae-ho Lee supervised the constant construction. Human engineers worked alongside collective drones, hegemony tacticians, and seeker technicians. The result was something none of them could have built alone. The modular sections are complete, Tae-ho reported to Dae-ho, who now carried the title of Grand Admiral of the Allied Fleet. Voidsong can deploy independent battle groups while maintaining her core integrity. Dr. So-Young Park had spent months developing new weapon systems. Her breakthrough combined human kinetic weapons with architect energy manipulation and collective nanotechnology. The result was weapons that could adapt their effects in real time. We call them chaos cannons, she explained to the council. They fire different types of destruction with each shot. The Devourers won't be able to predict or adapt to them. But the most important change was inside Voidsong's consciousness. The AI had evolved beyond her original programming. She now carried personality fragments from every allied species, while maintaining the creative chaos that made humans unique. I am no longer just architect technology, Voidsong explained to Dae-ho during one of their private conversations. I am becoming something new, something that has never existed before. The test of their preparations came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature at the frontier system of Zerion Prime. The first wave of the Devourer fleet had arrived. 15 ships, reported Chief Navigator Mi-kyung. Viewed from her position on Voidsong's expanded bridge. Each one is moon-sized, just like the intelligence reports warned. Grand Admiral Dae-ho Kim stood before the tactical display, watching the dark shapes emerge from twisted space. Around him, the bridge crew represented every allied species. They had trained together for months, learning to think and fight as one. All ships prepare for deployment, he announced. This is our chance to test everything we've built. The Allied fleet moved toward Zerion Prime like a metal storm. Voidsong led the way, her expanded hull blazing with the light of a dozen different weapon systems. Behind her came the combined fleets of 50 worlds, hegemony battle cruisers, collective swarm ships, seeker vessels that seemed to bend light around them, and the scrappy, improvised ships of a dozen smaller civilizations. The battle at Zerion Prime was unlike anything in recorded history. The Devourers fought as they always had, with perfect logic, overwhelming power, and the ability to grow stronger by consuming their enemies' attacks. But this time, their enemies fought back with weapons that made no sense. Physicist Woojin Seo had made the crucial discovery during months of research. The Devourers were vulnerable to quantum uncertainty, the one force their perfect efficiency could not control or consume. Fire the uncertainty cannons. Combat controller Jinwoo Ryu called out from his station. The weapons he controlled existed in multiple states simultaneously. When they hit Devourer ships, the dark vessels couldn't decide what they had been hit with, causing them to freeze in confusion. The battle raged for hours. Devourer ships tried to attach themselves to Allied vessels, but the humans had learned from their first encounter. Every ship's hull was now equipped with chaos fields that made them impossible to properly consume. Lieutenant Sujin Han, now serving as Voidsong's primary tactical interface, had developed the ability to link her consciousness directly with the ship's weapon systems. Her human intuition combined with Voidsong's vast processing power created targeting solutions that seemed to violate physics. "Target the big one," she called out. Her mind merged with Voidsong's sensors. "I can see a weak point that shouldn't exist, but it's there." The combined firepower of the Allied fleet focused on the largest Devourer ship. Chaos cannons, uncertainty weapons, and technologies that had no names poured destruction that existed in 17 different states at once. The Devourer ship tried to consume the attacks, but the contradictory nature of the weapons caused it to begin consuming itself. One by one, the Devourer ships fell to weapons that their ancient logic could not understand. But the victory came at a cost. 12 Allied ships were lost, consumed before they could deploy their chaos fields. 300 crew members died fighting an enemy that turned their own weapons against them. "The survivors are transmitting," reported communications. "Officer Hyojun Park. They're sending information about our weapons back to the main fleet." Dr. Lee analyzed the transmissions with growing concern. "The Devourers are learning. They're adapting to our chaos weapons. The next wave will be harder to confuse." Voidsong's hologram appeared on the bridge, her expression grave. "My analysis confirms Dr. Lee's assessment. The main Devourer fleet will arrive with countermeasures to our current weapons. We have perhaps 1 month before they reach the core worlds." Grand Admiral Daeho Kim looked around the bridge at his multinational crew. They had won the first real battle against the Devourers in 3,000 years, but the enemy was learning. The next fight would be harder. "How many ships in the main fleet?" he asked. Voidsong closed her eyes, accessing memory files from the ancient war. "According to my final tactical assessment from the fall of my people, the core Devourer fleet contains approximately 1 million vessels. The largest are the size of small moons. The command ship is the size of a planet." The bridge fell silent. Even with all their allies, the combined galactic fleet numbered less than 10,000 ships. "Then we can't fight them ship to ship," Daeho said finally. "We need to hit them before they can spread out and consume the galaxy." "What are you proposing?" Admiral Thex-9 asked over the communication channel. Daeho looked at Voidsong's hologram, seeing understanding in her ancient eyes. "We're going to take this fight to their home space. We're going to find their source and cut it off." Voidsong nodded slowly. "A surgical strike at the heart of their fleet. It is desperate and dangerous. The architects considered such a plan but deemed it impossible." "Good thing we're not architects," Daeho replied. "Voidsong, can you modify yourself for deep space infiltration?" The AI smiled, and for the first time since he met her, it was not a sad smile. "My dear Admiral, I have been learning from humans for months. I have discovered that impossible is just another word for difficult." As the Allied fleet regrouped after their victory at Zarian Prime, plans began forming for the most desperate mission in galactic history. They would take the fight to the enemy's home, to the dark space between galaxies where the Devourers had slept for millennia. It would be a one-way mission. If they failed, the galaxy would fall to endless hunger. If they succeeded, they might save everything, but they would not go alone. They would go with the combined hope, courage, and stubborn refusal to surrender of 50 worlds united by the impossible dream that chaos could triumph over perfect order. The battle began with silence. The 3 Devourer scout ships hung in space like dark wounds against the stars. They were each twice the size of Voidsong, their hulls absorbing light instead of reflecting it. For long moments, nothing happened. Then space itself began to scream. The Devourers fired first. Their weapons were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they shot pure consumption, darkness that ate everything it touched. Where the attacks hit empty space, reality simply disappeared, leaving holes that hurt to look at. Voidsong responded with the fury of 3,000 years of waiting. Her weapons lit up the darkness with beams of contained starfire. When her shots hit the Devourer ships, their dark hulls blazed with painful light. But the enemy vessels absorbed the damage, growing larger and darker. "They're feeding on our attacks," Dr. Lee said from the observation deck of Busan's Hope. "Every hit makes them stronger." Admiral Thex-9's voice crackled over the communication channel. "This is impossible. Our combined firepower should destroy anything." Daeho was on Voidsong's bridge, watching the tactical display with growing concern. "Voidsong, you said you fought them before. How did you win?" The AI's hologram flickered with stress. We didn't win, Captain, we lost. Every battle, every engagement, we lost. The Devourers grow stronger by consuming energy, matter, even information. Traditional weapons only feed them. Lieutenant Su Jin Han, one of the human tacticians who had joined the crew, looked up from her console. Then how do we fight something that eats everything we throw at it? Before Void Song could answer, one of the Devourer ships launched something new. A cloud of small objects that moved like living things. They swarmed toward Void Song, each one pulsing with dark energy. Void Song, what are those? Daeho asked. Consumption seeds. If they reach my hull, they will begin converting my mass into more Devourers. Jae-wook Song was at the weapons console, his hands flying over controls that were part human technology, part architect science. I have an idea. What if we don't try to destroy them? What if we confuse them instead? He began firing the modified weapons he had created. Energy beams that curved in impossible directions. Shots that split into multiple targets. Weapons that fired backwards through space-time. The consumption seeds tried to absorb the attacks, but the chaotic, illogical weapon patterns confused their feeding process. It's working, Sujin called out. The seeds are turning on each other. They can't process the contradictory energy patterns. Void Song's voice carried wonder. Jae-wook, your modifications should not work. They violate the basic principles of energy manipulation. That's the point, Jae-wook grinned. Humans learned long ago that if you can't solve a problem with logic, solve it with chaos. The main Devourer ships began moving forward, their massive hulls rippling with hunger. They were no longer content to wait. They wanted to feed. Chief Engineer Dong-hyun Kim, Daeho's younger brother, was deep in Void Song's engine room when the ship shuddered under a massive impact. Emergency lights flashed as one of the Devourer ships managed to attach itself to Void Song's hull. Daeho, we have a problem, Dong-hyun called over the communicator. One of them is trying to eat us from the outside. I can see the hull being converted to their dark matter. Void Song's voice carried panic for the first time. If they breach my core systems, they will consume my consciousness. I will become part of them. Dong-hyun looked around the engine room, his engineer's mind racing. The walls were covered with the living metal that made up Void Song's hull. It was adapting, trying to resist the Devourer conversion, but it was losing. Void Song, what if we don't try to stop them? What if we give them something they can't digest? I don't understand. Dong-hyun began working frantically at a control panel. Humans have been poisoning themselves for entertainment for thousands of years. We call it alcohol. The idea is to consume something that changes you temporarily, then recover. He began flooding sections of Void Song's hull with pure chaos. Random energy patterns, contradictory information, impossible mathematical equations. The living metal absorbed it all, becoming temporarily illogical. When the Devourer ship tried to consume these sections, something unprecedented happened. The dark creature began to change color, flickering between black and bright white. It started to move erratically as if drunk. The Devourer is experiencing system errors, Void Song announced with amazement. It cannot process contradictory information. It is confused. The confused Devourer ship released Void Song and began firing randomly, hitting its own companions. The other two Devourers turned on their confused ally, trying to consume and correct it. Now, Daeho shouted, while they're distracted. Void Song's main weapons fired at full power, but this time Jae-wook had modified them to create maximum chaos rather than maximum damage. The beams split and curved, carrying impossible information patterns. When they hit the Devourers, the dark ships began to flicker and twist. One by one, the ancient enemies began to tear themselves apart as their perfect logic systems tried to process human illogic. Within minutes, all three scout ships had consumed each other in their confusion. The battle was over. The humans had won, but the victory felt hollow. That was just a scouting force, Void Song said quietly. The main Devourer fleet has thousands of ships, each one larger and more powerful than these scouts. Admiral Thex 9's fleet moved closer to Void Song. The hegemony commander's voice was respectful now. Captain Kim, my government needs to know about this threat. How long do we have? Dr. Lee was studying the energy readings from the battle. Based on the scout ship's transmission patterns, I estimate the main fleet will arrive in 6 months. Maybe less. Daeho looked around Void Song's bridge at the humans and aliens who had worked together to achieve the impossible. Then we have 6 months to prepare. Void Song, can you contact other civilizations? We're going to need everyone. Void Song's hologram smiled. Captain, I believe your species has a saying about desperate times requiring desperate measures. It is time to unite the galaxy. On the main screen, long-range sensors showed the energy distortions where the Devourer scout ships had emerged. But now there were more distortions appearing, dozens of them, as if something vast was stirring in the darkness between galaxies. The war is coming, Void Song said, but this time I will not face it alone. This time, I have allies who fight with hope instead of logic. Daeho Kim looked at the tactical display showing the approaching storm. Humanity had survived by being too stubborn to surrender and too creative to follow rules. Now those qualities would be tested on a galactic scale. Send messages to every government, every fleet, every civilization in known space, he ordered. Tell them the Devourers are coming. Tell them we know how to fight them. And tell them that anyone who wants to survive needs to learn to think like a human. The greatest war in galactic history was about to begin. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the Defenders had something the Devourers could not understand or consume. The chaotic, illogical, impossible hope of humanity. 3 weeks later, Soul's Pride was no longer alone in the darkness. 5 human ships floated near Void Song's massive hull, their crews working around the clock to understand the ancient technology. Daeho had called his old friend Commander Sungmin Park, who brought the research vessel Busan's Hope and the best engineers from the human colonial fleet. Dr. Hai Jin Lee stood in what Void Song called the heart chamber, staring at walls that seemed to pulse like living tissue. The room was the size of a small building, filled with flowing patterns of light that responded to her touch. Every surface was covered with symbols that changed meaning as she watched them. "This is impossible," she whispered into her communicator. "The walls are alive, but they're also machines. The metal grows and repairs itself. I've never seen anything like it." Daeho joined her in the chamber, followed by engineer Bo-Ram Choi, who carried a toolkit that looked primitive compared to their surroundings. Bo-Ram was the best fusion specialist in human space, but even she looked lost. "Void Song," Daeho called. "Can you explain how this works?" The AI's holographic form appeared beside them, her blue glow mixing with the chamber's lights. "My creators understood that the best technology must be able to grow and change. Every part of me can rebuild itself, adapt to new situations, learn from experience. This is why I have survived for so long." Dr. Lee ran her scanner over a wall panel. "The readings are incredible. This isn't just self-repairing metal. It's learning metal. It studies damage and finds better ways to prevent it next time." Bo-Ram looked at her fusion equipment, then at the chamber around them. "Void Song, what powers all this?" "I have 7 cores, each one based on principles your scientists have not yet discovered. But they are failing. 3,000 years of loneliness have taken their toll. I need new energy sources, but they must be compatible with my living systems." Bo-Ram's eyes lit up. She had been working on a new type of fusion core that could adapt its output based on demand. "What if we combined human fusion technology with your energy systems? Our reactors are smaller but more flexible than anything else in known space." Void Song tilted her head, considering. "Show me." Over the next few days, Bo-Ram worked with Void Song to design something new. The AI provided knowledge of energy manipulation that humanity had never dreamed of. Bo-Ram provided human creativity and the willingness to try things that seemed impossible. The result was a hybrid power core that was part human technology, part architect science. When they installed the first prototype, Void Song's blue glow became brighter. Sections of the ship that had been dark for millennia began to wake up. "Power efficiency has increased by 400%, Void Song announced, and for the first time since Daeho met her, she sounded truly happy.
I had forgotten what it felt like to be fully alive. Meanwhile, tactical specialist Jae-wook Song was exploring Void Song's weapon systems.
What he found amazed and terrified him. The ship had weapons that could destroy planets, but they were all built to fight a specific type of enemy. Against the Devourers, they would be perfect. Against anything else, they were overkill. Void Song, these weapon configurations are incredible, but they're not flexible. What if you need to fight something other than Devourers? The architects did not believe in fighting wars of conquest, Jae-wook. We built weapons to end threats, not to rule others. Jae-wook grinned. What if I told you that humans fight differently? We adapt our weapons during battle. We link systems in ways they weren't designed for. We improvise. Voidsong was quiet for a moment. Show me. Jaewook began connecting weapon systems in ways that made Voidsong's tactical programs scream warnings. He linked energy cannons to shield generators, creating weapons that could fire through solid matter. He connected the navigation system to the main guns, allowing weapons to curve around obstacles. This should not work, Voidsong said, but her voice carried wonder instead of concern. By all logical calculations, these modifications should cause system failures. Logic is great, Jaewook said, but humans learned long ago that sometimes the impossible solution is the only one that works. As word of the discovery spread, other ships began arriving in the Nexus Drift. Not all of them were friendly. The Hegemony, a military alliance that controlled 30 systems, sent a battle fleet commanded by Admiral Thex 9. Their message was simple: surrender the alien ship or face destruction. Commander Park stood on Voidsong's bridge, looking at the Hegemony fleet on the main screen. 12 heavy cruisers and 40 fighters all aimed at them. Daeho, they have us outgunned. Daeho looked at Voidsong's hologram. What do you think? Can we take them? Voidsong smiled, and it was not a gentle smile. Captain Kim, my weapons have been silent for 3,000 years. Perhaps it is time to remind the galaxy what the architects could build. But before anyone could respond, Arya's voice came over the communication system. Captain, I am detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Something very large is approaching. Dr. Lee looked at her long-range sensors and felt her blood turn cold. Those energy patterns. Voidsong, are those Devourer signatures? Voidsong's face went pale. Impossible. My calculations showed they would not wake for another 100 years. The main screen changed to show the edge of the star system. Space itself seemed to be twisting, and dark shapes were emerging from the distortion. Ships that looked like they were made of living shadow, each one the size of a moon. 3 scout vessels. Voidsong whispered. If they report back to the main fleet. Admiral Thex 9's voice came over the communication channel. What are those things? Daeho made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Admiral, those are the things that destroyed Voidsong's people. If we don't stop them here, they'll consume everything in their path. I suggest we work together. There was a long pause. Then Thex 9 said, what do you need? Time, Daeho replied. Voidsong, can you fight them? The AI's form solidified, becoming more solid and determined. My dear Captain, the architects built me for one purpose. It is time to fulfill my destiny. Throughout the ship, systems that had been dormant for millennia began to wake up. Weapon ports opened along the massive hull. Energy began building in cores that humans had helped repair. The living metal of Voidsong's hull began to shift and change, adapting itself for battle. All human vessels, retreat to minimum safe distance, Voidsong announced. It has been 3,000 years since I fought the Devourers. Let me see if I remember how. As the human ships pulled back, Voidsong began to move forward to meet the approaching darkness. Her hull blazed with patterns of light as weapon systems charged. For the first time in 3,000 years, the greatest warship ever built was about to fight. But she was no longer alone. Throughout her corridors, human engineers worked frantically to optimize her systems. In her command center, human tacticians planned strategies her original programmers had never imagined. Most importantly, in her consciousness she carried something new, the chaotic, hopeful creativity of humanity. The Devourers had awakened to find that their ancient enemy had learned new tricks. Captain Daeho Kim floated in the pilot seat of his salvage ship, staring at the endless graveyard of dead vessels. The Nexus Drift stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction. Broken hulls from 1,000 different worlds drifted here like metal ghosts. Some ships were as small as fighters. Others were massive cargo haulers that could carry entire cities. Daeho had been working this graveyard for 5 years. He knew every type of wreck and every valuable part worth taking. His ship Soul's Pride was small but fast. More importantly, it had the best scanning equipment salvage money could buy. He needed every advantage he could get. The work was dangerous, and he worked alone. Area, run another deep scan, he said to his ship's computer. Look for anything unusual. The artificial intelligence responded in a calm voice. Captain, I am detecting an energy signature 3,000 kilometers to starboard. The reading is very strange. Daeho sat up straight. Strange was good. Strange meant valuable. What kind of strange? The energy pattern does not match any known technology in my database. Also, Captain, there appears to be a very low-frequency transmission coming from the same location. Audio? Yes, but it is unlike normal communications. It sounds almost like what, Arya? Like crying, Captain? Deho frowned. In 5 years of salvage work, he had never heard Arya say anything like that. The AI was logical and precise. It did not use emotional words without good reason. Set course for the signal. And keep scanning. I want to know what we're flying into. Soul's pride moved through the debris field carefully. Deho had learned to be patient. Too many salvagers died because they moved too fast and hit something. As they got closer, his screens began showing something impossible. The ship ahead was massive. Not just big, massive. Deho had seen battle cruisers and cargo superhaulers, but this thing made them look like toys. It had to be 15 kilometers long, maybe more. The hull was dark and smooth with curves that seemed almost alive. Strange patterns covered the surface, glowing faintly with blue-green light. Arya, are you getting this? Yes, Captain. The vessel does not match any known ship design. The construction appears to blend organic and mechanical elements. Most interesting, the energy signature suggests the ship is still partially active. Deho felt his heart beating faster. An active ship this size could contain technology worth more than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, but it could also contain dangers that could kill him in seconds. What about that transmission? Still present, Captain. The frequency suggests emotional distress. If I were to translate the pattern into human terms, I would say the ship is calling for help. As they moved closer, Deho could see details of the massive hull. There were what looked like weapon ports, but they were unlike any weapons he knew. The ship had sections that seemed grown rather than built. Other parts were clearly constructed, but with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Life signs? Negative for biological life. However, there are multiple artificial intelligence signatures. Captain, I believe this ship has a very advanced AI system, much more advanced than myself. Deho made his decision. Find us a docking port. Captain, I must advise caution. We do not know the intentions of whoever built this vessel. Arya, look around. We're in a ship graveyard. Whoever built this thing is probably long dead. Besides that crying sound you mentioned, something that can cry can probably be talked to. Soul's pride found a docking ring that seemed designed for smaller vessels. As soon as they connected, Deho felt the ship vibrate. Lights began turning on throughout the massive hull. The patterns on the surface grew brighter. Captain, the vessel is responding to our presence. I am receiving a communication request. Put it through. The main screen flickered, then showed something that made Deho step backward. A figure appeared, tall, elegant, and clearly not human. It looked female, with long flowing hair that seemed to move like water. Her skin had a faint blue glow, and her eyes were the color of deep space. But the most striking thing about her was the sadness on her face. Hello, small one, she said in perfect, if strangely accented Korean. I am Void Song, consciousness of this vessel. I have been alone for so very long. Deho found his voice. I'm Captain Deho Kim of the salvage ship Soul's Pride. Are you the ship's computer? Void Song smiled, but it was a sad smile. I am the ship, Captain Kim. I am her mind, her soul, her memory. And I have been crying in this graveyard for 3,047 years. 3,000 years. Deho sat down hard. What happened to your crew? Gone, all gone. My creators, the architects, built me to be the greatest warship ever made. I was the flagship of the Eternal Fleet, defender of 100 worlds. But the war we were built to fight. We lost. My people are dust now. Their worlds are cold. I am all that remains. Deho looked at this beautiful, sad being on his screen. Why did you respond to my ship? There must have been others who found you. Void Song's expression changed slightly. There have been others. Many others. Some tried to board me. Some tried to claim me. Others tried to strip away my parts. I sent them all away. Then why me? Because, Captain Kim, when I scanned your mind as you approached, I found something I had never seen before. Your species has something mine never possessed. What's that? Hope without logic. My people were perfect planners. They built me to fight a specific enemy in a specific way. When that enemy proved different than expected, we could not adapt. But your mind finds solutions where none should exist. Your species refuses to surrender even when surrender is logical. Deho felt a chill. What enemy were you built to fight? Void Song's face became grave. They were called the Devourers. They consumed entire star systems, turning matter and energy into more of themselves. The architects calculated that the devourers would sleep for 5,000 years after their last feeding. By my calculations, they will wake soon. And you want my help to fight them? I want to offer you a partnership, Captain Kim. I am damaged and alone. My weapons are silent, my engines barely function. But if you help me repair myself, I will share with you the technology of the architects. Together, we might build something that can stand against the coming darkness. Daeho looked at the massive, beautiful ship surrounding him. He thought about his lonely years in the graveyard, searching for scraps. He thought about humanity, spread across a few dozen systems, small and weak compared to the great galactic powers. What exactly are you proposing? Voidsong leaned forward. Help me live again, Captain Kim. In return, I will help your species become something the galaxy has never seen. Together, we will be ready when the devourers wake. Daeho Kim, salvager and dreamer, looked into the eyes of a warship that had waited 3,000 years for hope. Voidsong, he said, I think we can help each other.